Hi, my name is Valerie Anderson, and for my case study number 2, I'm going to be talking about the ethical principle of reporting tragedies. Stanley Foreman is a journalist for the Boston Herald, and on July 22nd, 1975, he received a phone call about a fire. He decided to go to the site to see if he could get a good story. While he was there, he decided to go to the rear of the building and see if he could get any coverage or anything back there. Whenever he walked around, he noticed a young woman and a baby on the 5th floor fire escape. About that time, a fireman also noticed them, and he was coming to save them. Whenever he was reaching out for the young baby, the fire escape gave way, and unfortunately, the two victims fell from the 5th-story fire escape. During the fall, Stanley Foreman was able to capture a series of photos of the two victims falling. Whenever they struck the ground, he turned away because it was very tragic. The woman ended up falling first and broke the young child's fall. The photo and the story he submitted to the Boston Herald was published the next day on the front page. The column was very large and almost took up the entire page. From this photo, Stanley Foreman received numerous prizes, such as the Pulitzer Prize, actually twice. He was awarded Picture of the Year, and he also earned a Nieman Fellowship at Harvard. When the photos were published, there was a lot of controversy about them because the young woman ended up passing away a few hours later. Whenever she passed away, Stanley Foreman assumed that the photo would not be run because it's unethical to put a picture of a dead body on, in the media. So he wasn't expecting it to be published, but it was, and he won many prizes from it. People were really concerned that this was not okay to do, not okay to post the picture of this young woman and child falling. But it was justified in the way from Stanley Foreman and from the Boston Herald that the photo was justifiable because it led to a bigger story of faulty fire escapes, which is really important for people to know about. People should be able to go in this situation, particularly in the fire. They should be able to go to the fire escape and be safe and be able to be rescued. The ethical dilemma here is the shocking and graphic image. What is the journalistic value of the photograph? What do they prove, and are they news? Why are they news? Do they dispel or affirm information the public had prior to seeing the image? So here, you have to ask yourself, what does that image add for news content? Unfortunately, like I mentioned before, the woman passed away a few hours after she was taken to the hospital. And so whenever they decided to run the story, they decided to run it in the idea that this information needed to be given to the public to be aware of faulty fire escapes. They didn't want people suffering, trying to save themselves for any longer. According to the National Press Photographers Association Code of Ethics, you must treat all subjects with respect and dignity, give special consideration to vulnerable subjects, and compassion to victims of crime and tragedy, intrude on private moments of grief and compassion only when the public has an overriding and justifiable need to see. So they saw that this need for the public to know about the faulty fire escapes was a little overrided the fact that her family would have a little bit more grief and, were greatly impacted by this photo of their daughter who had just passed on the front page of the Boston Herald. So helping victims that's the next dilemma. A lot of people were concerned that instead of trying to help the young woman and the child, that Stanley Foreman was just sitting around doing nothing. But in fact, he wasn't. He was doing his job. He is a journalist, and journalists are supposed to think about their company and their organization before they do anything. It's very important to them. They do not need to help victims in situations like this. They're not obligated to at all. It's like I said, it's basically journalists are there to report what happened, not to interfere really with anything that could turn into a different event or something like that. According to the University of New Mexico Student Magazine, Foreman was following the journalistic rule of not helping victims. This is a major ethical dilemma for journalists because in our human nature it's human nature to help someone. It's human nature to help another human, to care for them, to love them. And it's very hard for journalists to sit back and do nothing in a time of need. Also, the third dilemma is selfishness. So did Foreman post these photos or submit these photos to his editor so that they would be published and he would win these prizes? I'm not sure about that. I don't think so. I can't imagine that he would want to win something for a tragedy like this. He even, like I mentioned before, said that he didn't think the photo would be published. So I don't think that it was his intent to, receive these prizes for the tragedy and the dramatization of these photos. They're very emotional and could be hurtful to people, and I don't think that was his intent. So, ethical guidelines. Treat all subjects with respect and dignity, like I mentioned before. They are published because the Boston Herald felt that they needed to know about the Falties fire escapes. People can be on their fire escapes and be safe. They should be able to be that way. They should be able to wait there and be able to wait and be rescued by the firemen, which was just like an arm's reach away from these two victims. These fire escapes were faulty. They were not up to code. They were unacceptable, and that is why they collapsed, and these two victims were a part of this great tragedy. One of their lives was taken, and the other has, I'm sure, suffered some grief and guilt about this, even though at the time she was two. As they grow up, you hear about what happened. This rose a great deal of awareness because after that there were many cities throughout the United States who were required to check their fire escapes, who made sure that their fire escapes were perfect and this would not happen in their city or on their building or anything to anyone that they loved or cared about or any of their tenants or employees. No one wants this tragedy on their hands, and especially if it can be avoided. If it can be avoided, then you definitely want to avoid it. You want to get it fixed. You want to help people rather than hurt people. Whether you agree or disagree with the fact that this photo was published, as journalists, we are obligated to give the public information and provide them with content and news that can help them and save their lives, and information that's important and can affect everyone around them.